the left wing. Well, we've got one of the marquee fixtures of the rugby season coming up this weekend, with the added novelty that it's on at Croke Park. Leinster against Munster is tracking towards a sellout. Close to 75,000 tickets have been sold as we record this. We will also look ahead to this derby and review the weekend's action. Sinéad Kissane here, sitting in for Will Slattery. Luke Fitzgerald and Dave Kelly are here also. How are you, lads?
Good, Sinead, yeah.
Hi, Sinead. Hi, Luke.
Thanks for that lovely intro.
Luke, this game at Croker, as I said, looks like it's heading towards a sellout. Close to 75,000 tickets already sold. By God, this rivalry knows how to pull a crowd.
Yeah, it does, I suppose. And I think it's probably recaptured the imagination. I think there was a couple of years there where, Leinster just looked very dominant. But, you can definitely see, particularly in some very, very key positions on the pitch. Munster, I think, they got great unity down there. I think the coaching staff is pretty settled. They've been a bit more up and down than Leinster, I think, but have more silverware to show over the last two seasons. So, no, look, I think this is a really, it's a budding rivalry. As I said, you've got your Jack Crowleys, your Tyke Burns, these guys. If you have good guys in those positions, if you have a strong bow, straight away you're hard to beat, I think, if Munster play to their potential. So, I think you'd still go advantage Leinster, Sinead, but the rivalry is certainly back up and running in my opinion, and that's reflected in the ticket sales. People want to go and see what happens on the weekend, which is brilliant. Like, that's a huge number for a league game.
Yeah, it really is. Dave, you reminded us in your article on Monday morning, that they set a world record for an attendance at a club game with 82,208 for that Heineken Cup semi in 2009 that Luke, of course, played in. And you said in your article as well, like, even for this game this weekend, you wrote, there'll be more people at this than watch Dublin's 3 games in the Leinster Football Championship this year.
Yeah, I'm wary. Those numbers are always fascinating, and I mean, as we've heard on our other podcast, the GA Championship and structure has had other issues. I wouldn't say that every single punter heading up to Jones's Road or Clonliffe Road or Summer Hill, if they can find a way up that direction, will be necessarily rugby devotees this weekend. There's an element of it's an event, and more than anyone going to Bruce Springsteen or Coldplay would have been able to name you one of their many hit tunes. So there's an element of that, that's no bad thing either. But in terms of the rivalry, I think that feeds into a lot of it, and it's a different sense of a rivalry in terms of, Munster have won something more recently than Leinster, lest we forget. But also there is a kind of a niggling sense, I think, around the place about, and it's the age-old thing, and it probably fed into probably 06 and 09 when Luke was on the scene. It's the age-old kind of, and a bit like the Dubs, actually, ironically enough. It's the country versus the city thing, and the haves against the have-nots, and I'm putting those in quotation marks before mayors of several cities get onto us. And like, the poster boy for this is RG Snyman, who spent nearly 4 years at Munster, sadly crocked for a lot of it, very, very unfortunately, and suddenly he skips over the border, and we don't know whether he'll start, but he'll be there in blue this weekend. So even that itself, but also just that sense of that Leinster are privileged, they're buying all blacks, so they've got loads of money, they're filling Croker 70, 80,000, and it's all about them. Poor Munster, everybody's injured, they've no money, they're paying loans and debts on the stadium, and no more than Ulster, Connacht, there's a lot of, really 4 green fields. There's only kind of like the old days, there's one really big field and 3 poor old tenants trying to sucking on the teat in the background. So that's kind of fusing into it, which is kind of, intrigues me, apart from the battles on the field, which Luke kind of mentioned there, that there's an imbalance there. You'd expect Leinster to win. They're favourites. Look at the team they had in Treviso. We spoke about it last week, but it's Leinster, Munster, and as Robin McBride said yesterday, form, it goes out the window.
You agree with that, all that, Luke?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely a lot of truth to all that. I'd say, Leinster probably worked very hard since 2009, I'd say, to probably dispel that kind of view around the kind of the kind of city slickers. I think if you look around at the Leinster team, there's lots of people from all over the province there, and I think they've worked quite hard at that. I think it's fair to say since that, and really, you see that in the pre-season tours. They try and get out and train and all the in all the counties in Leinster, and in fairness, some of their best players are from outside of Dublin. So I think yeah, like that's probably the only bit that I would say. I think that Leinster have done a really good job in probably changing the perceptions there, but maybe not down in Munster. I think the have-nots thing, I think, is certainly, Munster can definitely have something to kind of quarrel about there. Leinster have an embarrassment of riches in that pack. Pretty much two international packs, plus a few who probably are not in consideration, but still have international caps. So that RG Snyman goes and, in fairness, knocks the light out in his first day out. I mean, he was imperious in the line out and looks like, he could be that guy for them. Just so silky, in terms of skills and offloading, his passing pre-contact, which is so important at Leinster. He'll be a really nice foil for whoever is next to him, I think. Still not sure he's the. I was going to say I'm still not sure he's the number one, but he's certainly whoever those top three guys that are going to be playing in the Leinster second row are all world-class players. I mean, I think unbelievably highly of James Ryan. He seems to be the forgotten man in my mind. But yeah, look, the RG Snyman thing is very controversial, and he looked like he's going to be a really key part of the puzzle. Even if he doesn't start week in, week out, off the bench, he'd be a disaster. You saw how Munster used him last season. But look, I think the one thing we can all agree on is that this match, I think there was 5 points, 5 points in the match in the Aviva last year, albeit probably not an unbelievably tight one, but there was a real nail biter down in Thome. I think it was only 6 points. It was tricky conditions now. I think it was 9-3 if memory serves. But this match will be, I expect it to be tight. I expect Munster, they rallied really well last week. I know we'll go into it in a bit more detail, but Leinster looked very strong. So Munster will need to kind of keep a little bit of that momentum going that they got from last week, which was an impressive match against the Ospreys in very difficult conditions. So brilliant match. Loads going on in the background, as Dave discussed. And I think both tribes want this one bad. This is the one they look out for. Both sides look out for every year, I think. And yeah, it's going to be physical. I can't wait to watch.
It is. I'm actually talking about kind of revenue and have-nots and all the rest, but a spokesperson for Leinster reminded me that this will be all Leinster revenue. So this game, whereas the semi-final last season against Northampton, when it was sold out in days for the Champions Cup semi-final, the revenue for that went to EPCR, but this weekend it will be all Leinster revenue. So what a payday for them. Luke, before we get into the games and everything, can you just take me back, and what is different about playing at Croke Park?
Well, I suppose from a technical side, it's just that, the pitch is a good bit bigger. I think you only really realize how good the Gaelic football and the hurlers, those kind of athletes are. That pitch is a long pitch. Good 25 meters or so extra, I think. So I think it's kind of tricky. It's also a little bit wider. So I remember talking to, particularly for the kickers, there's a little bit of a learning curve to go on there, because oftentimes kickers, Sinead, will use kind of different hoarding around, behind. So if they're looking at it, they look for some advertisement or whatever behind the post.
Or Ronan O'Gara's face, like Sexton did.
Yeah. Exactly. Whatever you need to do to get it over the bar, Sinead. But those kind of things are a little bit different when you're playing on the rugby pitch there, and also going for touch can be a little bit trickier. But I expect them to have a bit of time in there, and most of these guys will have played a match there. The key guys will have played a match there at some point in the recent times. So I think they'll get over that pretty quickly. I think, look, that many people at a game, I mean, that is a big amount of pressure. You've got to travel in to the stadium, you see all the supporters outside. I'm sure they'll be all across. I can't remember the name of the bar. Is the Croke Park? Is it called? I don't know what the name of the pub is and the hotel across the road, but
Croke Park Hotel is across the road. Yeah,
like the atmosphere around there is buzzing, Dave, isn't it? Like, it's really, really good. I'm sure there'll be a few people who'll come up the night before and that, and probably have a few, probably might be still rolling through, who knows, but it'll be a big buzz. I think everyone's, as I said, excited for it, and I think they're the kind of things that this amount of people kind of bring to a game like that, is that there's no way Munster are going to go down easy here. Leinster will definitely be the favourites, kind of, I suppose, at home, but obviously, they're kind of a superior record as well, and probably a deeper squad at this point. But, make no bones about it, when there's this many people behind you, when you've got all that travelling support coming up, and lots of people in the city obviously supporting Munster too, are working up here, you know, this is going to be unbelievably physical. And that's generally what wins games of rugby. Leinster have all the kind of snazzy kind of play and all that kind of stuff. Not that Munster don't either, but Leinster kind of probably traditionally seem to be the kind of flary type team. That doesn't matter in these fixtures, And what I remember is that, playing against those brilliant Munster packs in 2009, we definitely were not the favourites going into that one. And actually, I think they were probably a better team at that juncture. So this was a big upset that we got. So I would be, cautious if I was Leinster, because when the shoe was on our foot in terms of the underdog status, we were able to pull out a big one in Croker. We didn't do it in the RDS. We got thumped in the RDS and in Thomond that year, I think, like very comprehensively. So, I wouldn't be reading too much into last year. This is very much almost like a once-off Sinead, and that's definitely one thing I would be advising, both teams about. If I was in their dressing room coming into a match in Croker.
Wow. Okay, listen, we'll get into that a bit more. Let's just look back over their performances, Dave, first, and that Munster 23, Ospreys 0 result in Cork in what looked like absolutely horrendous weather conditions, so it seems from the TV. We know the heat was on them last week after that loss to Zebre, but they really did deliver an impressive response, Dave, didn't they? They had that try after 10 or 11 seconds from Shane McCarthy. My favourite try was that gorgeous one that finished by Jack O'Donoghue that was keeping Ospreys scoreless. All in all, it was a good night. Now, there were a few injury concerns. We will get onto that. But it was the response we were expecting, I suppose.
Yeah, look, we alluded to it last week, and I disagreed with Luke in terms of what it meant, and I think the results and the performance in Cork, where they're unbeaten now for quite a long time, I think it actually confirms and copper fastens my point, because it just proves how disappointing it was that they needed to go to those depths, and then also have those talismen coming back like Peter and Tig to turn it around. And it was inevitable that they would turn it around, and we kind of predicted as much. And I wouldn't be overstating, Ospreys really as a fearsome opponent. The good start helped them, and they had that attitude. And as we said last week, once Peter and Tig, in fairness, who's captain, pitched up at training, like there wasn't going to be any other way. But you can't remove what happened the previous week. That's still there. That's a stain, and that will be there for the whole season. And it just unnerves me that when these guys are away, and we'll speak about it with Leinster. It just always reminds me of something Jerry Flannery used to tell me in the old days of when they were winning Heineken Cups, European Cups in 06 and 09, that 06, 08, that they were looking behind them at. I used to always argue, why didn't you bring through players, because they went through that depression for so long. And he said, well, we were looking at the guys training with us, and they weren't either one, ready, or two, good enough. And that's the worry about what happened in Italy. But yeah, I mean, it was a good bounce back, and obviously they needed it heading into this week, because if they'd stuttered again for second week in a row, they're at no business pulling out an emotional performance against Leinster after flopping 2 weeks in a row. So at least they have that something. They just steadied themselves. But that's all, I think. That's all. And as you say, like, they got Mike Haley and Calvin Ash. We won't know till later today how they're going to pitch up. Okay, if Sean O'Brien sent back from emerging Irish duty. Nankivel could be back, and he's a proper player, as Luke could know from being in that position before. He's a really, really good footballer. I really like him. But they're struggling, they're really struggling in the three quarters, especially. And you're asking a lot for Jack Crowley and Craig Casey, who were, they were just on the money last weekend. But you're almost asking them to carry it, because, again, on paper, it's not on paper. I know that. It's all about here. Like it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to get, a bit more than parity up front. So you're really, asking Craig to kind of bury that ball out of, a pack that could be struggling, could be going backwards a bit. But in terms of restorative, that's what it was. It was restorative. I would say it was nothing more than that.
Okay. Luke?
Yeah, look, I suppose the key thing is that they did restore it, that kind of way, and now they have a chance to get a bit of momentum. A big win, I think, can really give you that belief. I mean, if you think of the year Munster won the league, it was probably the match against South Africa in Porky Queeve that really turned the season. I mean, that was a pretty awful season. So I kind of see these matches for Leinster as that kind of catalyst for them. It's a place where guys you're not 100% sure about get that belief that they can do it against the better teams. Now, I agree completely with Dave. I do think the big guys are very, very important for Munster. They just don't have the same kind of depth that Leinster do have. But they're kind of in key positions for them, and I think, guys like Hodnett's becoming a real leader. I thought he was superb on the weekend. I thought, like, Byrne is, he's been around a while now. He might be the best player in the league. He is so good. Everything he does, I just like. I just feel like sometimes, look, there's a penalty or two here, but he's competing so hard. He's a nightmare to play against. Brilliant in the line out, unbelievable in kind of loose play. Great hands. Like, seems to never make a bad decision really. Bar maybe over competing at times, which I'm not sure anyone would have a problem with given how many turnovers he has. But look, the match will still come down.
And Gav Coombs as well against Doris.
Very good off the bench, wasn't he, Dave? I thought he was crucial, wasn't he?
Because Gav is almost like, he's very frustrating because he's so much talent and physicality and kind of raw strength, and you expect him to just go through several walls and keep on going through bigger walls. But I don't think he's trusted at international level that much. I don't know what's going on there.
Do you wonder about the pace sometimes, Dave?
Yeah, and then obviously
that's the one thing that I think they hear them say, isn't it? Like, because it's not a strength issue, it's not a size issue. It's just that's the only difference I can kind of maybe see. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Obviously, you've got Quaylen Doris then, who's possibly a Lions captain. So he's kind of measuring up against that. We spoke about Jack Owen possibly having to leave Ireland last week because
he was unbelievable on the weekend, Dave. I'm not sure they can net Conan and go. I don't know. He was unbelievable, I thought.
But sure, they got him in there at number 6. They made sure to accommodate him, Luke.
I think so. Like, I think they're obviously around negotiation time, Sinead. So his minutes will go up around now.
They offered Shawnee O'Brien the captaincy in the old days, didn't they? So you never know.
Yeah. Look, they have leaders there. I mean, the one area, I mean, look, you're going off is a bit of a concern for them, Like, I think they're just a little bit skinnier in the pack, guys, I think. And that's the one area you'd be just saying, oh, I wonder, like, they've got some experienced guys coming there too and some young talent. But when you look at Leinster just look a little bit grizzled, don't they, I think, compared to them. And they look like if there's a few guys go down, like Kelleher goes down, and that's probably the only area you'd say, Leinster from having probably had the two best hookers maybe, definitely the best 1-2 combination probably in Europe, if not the world. They now all of a sudden are down to probably Barron if Kelleher's injuries, kind of serious. But he looked brilliant on the weekend, I thought. So, not so sure how big a loss that is at the moment. If he can kind of continue that form, but Munster just aren't able to ship those kind of losses as Leinster are, and this game is. Make no bones about it. Your kicking and your pack is what's going to win this one, because I just don't see either defense wilting. I just think they're going to be really up for this, really physical and organized. They're two teams that know each other very well. So my thinking on this is set piece and kicking. I'm not overcomplicating it in my own head. I just think those two things are going to be key in the weekend. And I think Munster's kicking game will be good, but it's can they compete with that pack, as Dave said? Can they give Casey some kind of decent ball?
But interestingly, though, as I exclusively revealed last week, my inglorious history as a tight head. I mean, Stephen Archer, who has probably been written off for probably about the last 8 seasons. He had a brilliant game at the weekend, and Leinster lost 4 scrums against Treviso. Now, again, speaking to Robin McBride yesterday, he kind of it was one of those that I remember from speaking to Niall O'Donovan when he was with Eddie O'Sullivan. If you ask Niall O'Donovan about a weakness, he'd speak immediately about another strength. It's classic. It's classic, probably business class stuff when you're trying to kind of concentrate on a different area. But he said it wasn't really a level playing field. Anyway, he talked a bit of mumbo jumbo, but the bottom line is that against okay, they had Italian internationals back, but Treviso, as we said last week, they're not what they used to be at the start of this season compared to last season. And we're not hoping for 100,000 scrums at the weekend, and the weather is not set too unfair. But that would again just be a little kind of inkling that if you go 2 or 3% in the physicality, emotion, being in the moment sense of it, that Munster might kind of fancy possibly. And if it's a game of moments as well, if it's tight, 1 or 2 scrums either way could again give them 3 or kick to the corner 5-7. So just listen, playing devil's advocate, I don't think so. I think Leinster have too much scoring power when they get the ball that they will get. But I mean, I don't think Munster are without a hope at all. I mean, it's interesting. I spoke to John de Villiers about something today. He was at school sports day, and like his first game, you played in it, Luke. 30-0, 30 zip.
I remember it.
Up in Dublin,
I don't day at the office.
Yeah, and I mean, a few people I spoke to now who'd be kind of Munster rugby fans today are very nervous about the game, because they can see the worst is going to happen. That's what supporters do, as we know from any of our codes and any of the clubs we follow. But I don't expect that to happen. But it just reminds you that there's an anxiety always with Munster when they're not in tip-top shape, and they're not in tip-top shape. I mean, that's just, we're not seeing any untruths there.
We've seen it before, though. They tend to come out fighting at the same time, but obviously this is a big challenge this weekend. Luke, you mentioned him earlier, RG Snyman, very impressive in Leinster's 35-5 win over Benetton. He played 50-51 minutes. He looked very much at home in a Leinster jersey.
He did, and I think the point I made about the set piece, and I think Dave's making a very good point about the Leinster scrum. I thought it was so Leinster actually won a few penalties when he was on the pitch and looked very, very solid in the scrum while he was on the pitch. So I wonder, will he have a big impact there? Plus, remember, there was no Ryan last week as well. So that's one thing maybe to consider. Oftentimes, and of course the front rowers are definitely the most important there. But I do think, you have a couple of big guys in behind you as well in the row. Does make a big difference. So he made a difference there, and I thought he was super in the line out. And then around the pitch, just those lovely touches for a big man, So
would you start him this weekend? I know you're a big fan of James Ryan.
I don't know. I think I'd nearly rather have him on the bench. I think just because there'll be an emotional side to this thing as well. I think you get brilliant impact from. I wonder, would it just be because the Munster lads would be trying to hoe into him. You know what I mean? I'd love to see him get 5 or 6 games in a row for Leinster without any kind of injuries. And the poor guys had awful injuries, So I think maybe it's a weird thing to say because he's or something like that, but I might just hold him off physically and just say, you know what, I'll leave you for the last 30 here. You'll have a big impact, and plus the game will hopefully have opened up then, so you really see some of his best facets. So it's a very tight call about who's going to be that two for Leinster in that space. And then you throw in Ryan Baird, who, look, I think he is a 6, but he was decent when he came on the weekend, bar the yellow card. So look, it's good. These are all good problems to have, and I think maybe because he was so good, I think he probably will get the start. But I think we're guessing at this point, aren't we? It's as I said, a great problem to have. I mean, if you're fighting over James Ryan and Joe McCarthy to partner him, how bad, as they say. But I think that will be the winning of the match, and it will be interesting to see if that does make the difference, Dave. I think, I'd say Leinster probably do have. I actually agree. I thought Stephen Archer finished last season brilliantly well as well, so he's kind of continued on that form. So, I think you're right. He's been underestimated for a long time, but I do think, Porter and Ty Furlong are still. They do have an edge there, Leinster. They lose something with Kelleher if he's not back, but I just think they might have just a little bit too much for them with Snyman starting or coming in off the bench. So we wait and see on that. And I think what I would add is that if that front 5 can get on top of teams, and I think they will get on top of a lot of teams this year, not just Munster. I think the back row, I mean, we just saw how destructive Doris is. I mean, there was one run, it was called back for kind of, crossing line, but my God, he went through about 4 or 5, Benetton players. So he looks like he's started this season like he finished. Mentioned was man of the match, and deservedly so. He was so good throughout. They'd be so hard to contain over the course of 80 minutes, and they'll give that dangerous backline loads of opportunities, I think, against nearly every team in the competition. So it's a big ask. I agree though with Dave. I think this one is tight. I don't see this being, more than a score. Actually, I do think Munster put up a big fight and contain them, but not for the whole game. I think Leinster edged this one.
Yeah, I agree, Lou. I think James and Joe start. The interesting thing as well about RG was that there was a line out, as a defensive line out, where normally they don't really attack. They attacked in 2 pods, which is kind of interesting. Almost that he's almost that kind of luxury. That he's kind of so freaky that you can kind of do other stuff. And kind of that risk reward kind of element of it. It'll also be interesting to see what happens. Laws of unintended consequences. The bench. I mean, like we saw with the injury at the weekend, like with Jimmy going off. I mean, it just meant it messed around everything. So, like, obviously, like Kieran Foley did get a bit of his time. I got the minutes on the pitch, but it probably didn't get enough minutes on the pitch where they wanted to see him and where everyone kind of else wanted to see him.
He looked good though, Dave. He looked bloody good.
No, exactly. But just in the overall scheme of things, I don't know, would that be enough to sway the debate? And then it just means that you're kind of leaving the other forward on the, like, okay, you had Baird's yellow as well, but like Scott Penny is kind of sitting on his for like nearly all the game, and you kind of go, well, what's the point in the 6th?
In the 6th too, yeah.
So that's a kind of a quirky, maybe slightly nerdish, pedantic point, but I don't know if, again, the law of unintended consequences, if that means, having gone through all that, whether it's going to be, and it's amazing how a lot of people will squirm on their own whatsits when they hear this, that it's going to be, it might be Ross starting at the weekend.
You think?
Because there wasn't enough evidence from Kieran, and also because if Jimmy is struggling and it's a hamstring, do you risk it? And Jordan Larmour, again, they were quite vague about that yesterday. And Robin McBride actually said he kind of didn't know, and then I said it was he grabbed a hamstring, which I was never fit enough to do in the old days. But so if you're kind of struggling with a couple in the back three, and you're already pushing, Jamie around, you've got Hugo there. Does Kieran Foley have to go into the midfield, and then you have to play Ross 10?
I'm drawing a blank on, actually. Is Robbie Henshaw? Is that a long term? I can't remember now.
Robbie Henshaw,
natural to come back in there, wouldn't he? Then you push Osborne out to the wing, maybe.
Robbie's been kind of in the ether, but he hasn't been declared unfit or unavailable for selection or anything like that. But he hasn't been mentioned either in dispatches. So one would have thought that he would have been available for 3, if not round 4. This is round 4. So, but there hasn't been.
He's a fit guy too, Dave. He could come in straight. Robbie's really, he's one of those guys. He seems to be, he could be injured for ages and seems to be able to come straight back in, But look, they have some good problems there too, though. Like, I think, like, Osborne is, he's turned into the new Swiss Army knife. So maybe he's the guy who moves around there. Keenan, I have to say, looked like he looked so quick and fit out there. I actually think the 7s might have been good for him. I have my own thoughts on missing the tour to South Africa, and I think he did miss out on a good one there. But look, 7s is a love for him, and as it turns out, if that injury, whatever that injury he was carrying isn't kind of hanging around, from the evidence of the weekend, he looked unbelievable. He looked so fit and strong, I thought. So maybe it's actually been quite a good thing. He comes back very refreshed this season, and I think he'll have that little bit of competition will be niggling in the back of his mind too. I think he needs to it looks to me like he needed to set that straight, because he was a man on a mission at the weekend, I thought. So I think there might be a bit of jiggery pokery, Dave, but I do feel like they still will put out a very, very strong backline out there, and yeah, look, for me, Frawley looked, he was so good in the tackle as well. And I mean, the finish for the try, the handoff, I mean, wow. Because if you look at him, he's nearly kind of falling off the pass when he puts, I think it's Ringrose through the hole.
Yeah.
But the ground he makes up as well to kind of get in the support line from Gibson Park, Sinead, I just thought like outstanding. And even I just thought, Gibson Park, like pin the ears back. I think you've got it. And when he passed inside, I was thinking, oh no, he's going to get caught. But the strength of Frawley, like very similar to Crowley on the weekend for Munster, two very good athletes in there. Great pace, strong, don't mind getting stuck in. Love to see that from 10. So I hope they kind of stick with him, because I think Frawley needs time in the pocket. Byrne was good, but I think we probably know what we get with Byrne at this point. So I think they do need to give Frawley a proper look, and against the good teams where the pressure's on, with hopefully 82 in the stands.
And he looked really assured as well, didn't he, Luke? I mean, I think that's what he did over in South Africa. Like, he just seems to have that confidence there, like, the way he performed at the weekend, and his kicks as well were on the money, his conversions.
Oh, from the Conan one, then look, it was such a smooth strike because he can kick it so far. And I think some of the kicking out of hand was very encouraging as well. I thought Leinster's actually chase wasn't unbelievable all day, but you kind of get that at the start of the season sometimes, and that's kind of a sticky pitch down there. But I do, I have to say, some of his kicking was really, really good, and his decision making looked good. Yeah, as you say, looked very assured. Made a lot of good decisions, and that's kind of the key with that position, is that you're not trying to shoot the lights out every single time. 95% of your decisions need to be the first thing that you see, just nice simple options, and then you get to play that magical one where he finishes off the try, the lovely delayed pass, the little pump fake in, and then just dragging the defender out of position, putting Ringrose through the hole, and then we get to see that explosive power finishing off the try. So those opportunities will come to him. And the reason I think it's so important, sorry, the lights have gone out here, I don't know what's going on, but I think the thing the thing with Frawley is he'll be more comfortable making 95% of the first decisions if he has more time and is allowed to make a few errors. You need to know that the people in the stand back you. And that gives you a little bit of comfort to make an error too. You're not trying to shoot the lights out. Go, well, if I don't make a magical play, are they going to pick me next week? So, I agree with Dave. It's hard to say. He convinced everyone with how little time he played in there, but for me there was enough, and I think enough to say, well, look, let's give this guy kind of 5 to 10 games in the pocket. But look, it's a bloody nightmare trying to get time in the Leinster 10 slot. So. I don't envy him the task, but I think it's the right decision for Leinster in the long term. Whether they make it or not, we wait and see.
Well, they've too many out halves, as Munster would tell you. But you're completely right. I mean, we lost the great Johan Neeskens yesterday, the Dutch artist, and I mean the beauty of any great sportsman, and that's the position that we love so well. The tens. I mean, it's there's pieces about it every week, and it's storied in Irish history, going back half a century to Ward and Campbell, and we love the rivalries. But in terms of those two guys, and then even unfairly, you're looking at a Ross Byrne. There's an element that, okay, Ross is Mr. Boring, and like Kieran Frawley is all Mr. Sexy, but it's not about that. Ross Byrne can only play as well as his pack allows him to play, and the animation that's behind him. And as you said, mentioning Kieran and Jack as well earlier, like their kicking game, decision making. I mean, the great players are great because 98%, 99% of their tasks are utterly functional. Now, 98% of the population can't perform them, but they have to perform them 99% of the time. And then it's the 1%, that little bit of magic, once, twice, 3 times a game. And that turns the game and makes everyone go, ooh, and ah. And that's why we love them. Now, they make mistakes, and that's why we love them too, because they are trying to perform those moments that make us jump up out of our seats. And as you are allowed to in Croke Park, spill your beer. So that's why it's interesting. And I do hope from if you're looking at it from an Irish rugby point of view, but also just from a neutral's point of view in terms of something that's going to entertain you, it would be great to see them both in opposition this weekend, because that's an exciting narrative, and that's an exciting, kind of blockbuster kind of microcosm of a game that is, storied in Irish history. But to see those two guys face off, and they're not facing off like in a boxing ring, but there is an element of that kind of, pugilistic kind of, mano a mano combat about it. So, listen, make it happen, Leo.
Come here. Well said there, Dave. Well said. Come here, Luke. You've kind of both mentioned the areas that you feel Leinster could get on top of Munster. What areas can Munster go after Leinster? I mean, a lot of talk, obviously, about the Leinster defence. Where do you feel they can go after Leinster this weekend?
Well, I think so if you look at Munster's line out, like if O'Mahony's playing, I mean, there's no better man as a defensive line out at the front of the line out. O'Mahony's like imperious there. He has wrecked a lot of game plans over the years. Byrne too, excellent in that department. He's become a great reader of the line out from what I can see. So that's an area where I think, they'll need to be good, because I just think, Munster as well they have quite a nice attacking line out too, so that's an area where line out, I think, is a key component of the game. I think, probably scrum time. I don't know if it's probably, I give Leinster a slight edge, but not a huge one, I think, if they can go honours even there, I think that'll be a good result, just given the Leinster power in the back, kind of in the back five of the scrum, and obviously the two props are kind of studs as well for Leinster. It's definitely the two starting props, so probably maybe a slight edge, although there'll be a few hurt people down in Munster to want to rectify or want to prove me wrong on that one. But I think if they get honours even there, and if they get so the line is the key. I think they've got to kick brilliantly. That's very important against this defense for Leinster. I think they're going to, you can see, there'll be times where they get on top of you, and you won't, you don't want to panic there against this kind of Nina Bar defense. But you did see as well, Benetton opened them up loads of times, so there will be opportunities there. But to be in the game for more of the game, weird expression, but they need to kick well against that pressure. You need to put them on the back foot and get them turning. You can't, like, if you're going backwards against this Leinster defense, I just think there's no future in that for you. So I think they need to be tactical about how to do that, whether that's crossfield kicks, trying to ping that Leinster defense, because they're going to be coming up so hard. Little chips in behind from time to time, just to keep them a little bit honest, give them a little bit of doubt in the mind. But I do think they're going to have to compete very hard in the air, which I think against most of the Leinster back three, that's a difficult job, and guys like McCarthy, like that'll be a big learning curve for him coming up against probably an international back three player, whoever he's playing against. So they're the big asks. I think if they do well in those departments, this game is tight, and if it's tight, Leinster do get nervous. We've seen that in the big games. They can get nervous. They can get in their own way. They continue to play no matter what. They only know one way how to play. And that can work against you if you're really organised defensively, if you kick well, and if you're on top of them in set piece. It's not an unbelievably difficult formula to get on top of Leinster. There are plenty of teams who cause them trouble regularly enough. And I think that's how I would be going about thinking about attacking Leinster, Sinead.
Dave?
Yeah, and okay, personnel are different, so you'd expect Leinster to be a bit more proficient than they have been at the start of the season. But again, the more you mentioned Tig and Peter in the air on the floor as well could be. That's all about moments, though. And again, you're picking out the old Czechs phrases there, and Eddie phrases possibly, and Decky even. Be in the game for more of the game. It's about moments and when to realize those moments are, because if they pull one out of the line just for the possibility of a poach, which is maybe only 40-60 or 30-70, then they're suddenly struggling on the edge, and that's when Leinster burn you. So it's back to the game is about decisions, and I mean it's back to we talked about it with Jack and Kieran. I mean it's those generals led by Tig and Peter, the grizzled ones who will know, and they'll sniff when to go for it. But if they're going for it a lot of the time in their own 22 or in their own red zone, that's going to be a big struggle. So they need to be playing that game in the right area and be able to get the ball, winning back the ball in the right area, almost like in a kind of like counter press way. Like just, if they're winning turnovers, for the first 20 minutes and getting roars in their own 22, okay, it might just denude Leinster a bit. It might kind of slightly dishearten them, but that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. So if they can, construct a very kind of cohesive game in terms of like good kicking game, solid set piece defense and attack, especially from touch. If you're guessing, they might seek to go to touch maybe a little bit more than normal. I think they might do. And then once you're there in the last, not even in the red zone, if you're just inside from the 10-meter in, seeking those opportunities to win the ball, maybe get penalties, 3-6, get in the game that way.
Do you think? Yeah. I think they might need to score a few tries as well, Dave, which I think they're very capable of doing, particularly off maul. But as well, some of the interplay, I thought I like some of the interplay amongst the forwards, Dave. I thought against very difficult conditions against the Ospreys. Think about the McCarthy break for the O'Donoghue try. Now I didn't love McCarthy hanging on to that. He thought that ball should have been passed before the tackle. I thought he was lucky it was a bad tackle and he was able to so easily offload it without breaking stride. But I think they did have some nice interplay in there, and that will be important too because you can't be hanging on for 80 minutes. You'll need to have your own patches where you're on top, and their forwards over the last couple of seasons, when they get a bit of momentum, they actually are very good. The pick and go game, the little bit of interplay where Byrne can throw a pass inside outside, or they're looking for a winger running off kind of a forward, something kind of unusual that maybe Leinster haven't seen. I think those things will be kind of important as well, Dave.
Yeah, and Mike Prendergast has shown us like they can play ball now, which is probably something they didn't obviously have under the radically reformed Johan van Graan over in Bath. They can play ball now. They're allowed to play ball. So yeah, I mean I'm wary of. I know we've built up games before that. Oh, this is going to be a tri-fest, and it's like 15-14 and a scrap. But so I they may not necessarily need those tries, but they do know how to score them. Yeah, and they can I mean they played a bit of rugby in miserable bloody weather there in Cork at the weekend. You know what I mean? As well as that was predominantly heart and winning the stuff up front. But yeah, I just think in terms of knowing they can play football, I don't know, will they have enough of footballers on the pitch? That's the problem. When you go back to just the depth of the squad at the moment. But yeah, sure, they're obviously a completely different team to before, and also defensively they're leaking slightly at the moment. And again, listen, they got the zip at the weekend, which will be a huge bonus. But as I said, I'm not going to be putting Ospreys up on the pedestal of the best URC teams I've ever seen. So, you'd hope you'd hope that has kind of settled them a little bit. But I just kind of worry that if they're put under pressure by some slick Leinster stuff, that they could be in trouble.
Okay, well, that kicks off at 5:45 on Saturday. Nicely set up by you lads. I'm going to ask for your predictions at the end, although I kind of get a sense of what way you're thinking. The other derby game this weekend is Ulster against Connacht in Belfast on Saturday night as well, 8 o'clock kickoff. Luke, Connacht, won again at the weekend, 23 points to 24, a 1-point win over Scarlets. What a kick at the end. Great kick by Colford. Actually, Matt Hansen just before that did so well to keep the ball in play and they got that penalty then later. Jack Carty had gone up by this stage. Ford stepped up, kicked the penalty. A really good win for Connacht.
A really great win. They nearly shot themselves in the foot, like some amount of penalties in the second half. But some of the tries were brilliant, and I think, look, the worry for me with Connacht at the moment, it's not that they can't break teams open. They look very, very dangerous. It's just that little bit of, just a little bit lax, aren't they? At times defensively they can be a little bit loose. It looks like a little bit easy to get through them at times. You saw that against Munster as well. But I definitely saw improvements. I would say, similar to the Ospreys, not a vintage kind of Scarlets team anymore. Parky Scarlets used to be or Stratty before that used to be a pretty intimidating place to go and play rugby. It's not really that anymore. But they made life a little bit difficult for themselves. I mean, they were in good position when Bunny Akey puts in that tackle. Like, it's so needless. And I actually think he was very, very lucky boy to not get a red card. I mean, I didn't see many mitigating factors in that. So they were lucky he came back on the pitch, and that's kind of a loose one for such a good player to make that kind of hit on a guy. So yeah, look, I think if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, they'll be, they'll compete with anyone this year, and they'll be able to break teams down. And as we saw with Ulster, I know we haven't covered them yet, but I mean, look, Bulls are difficult to play against, no doubt about it. But they still 40 points, at a bit of a canter. The scoreline didn't look as miserable as it was, with with the kind of few consolations at the end. But they will, I think, give you opportunities, and you can open them up, and Connacht will cause them a little bit of trouble up there. And look, they've had a win up there recently in a match that mattered. Was it 2 years ago, I think, or three? Was it maybe 3 years ago at this point? But they've had a bit of success there is the point. So it's not the place. I mean, Connacht, I think that was a really barren place for Connacht for a really long time. But they've had some recent success there. So I don't think they feared as much as they used to. And as I said, if they can be a little bit more sensible, not give away easy pens, be a bit sturdier defensively, they're a match for any team. They've got some serious quality behind the scrum, and a few veterans in that pack too here and there. So yeah, they're a tough proposition. It'll be a great game. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's a bit overshadowed by the Munster game. What do you think, Dave? Obviously, Ulster beaten 47-21 by the Bulls, as you mentioned there, Luke. So that's kind of their stint in South Africa wrapped up. But they'll want to get back home, Ulster, pick off results-wise where they left off, with that opening win against Glasgow Warriors. How do you see this game going, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke with Connacht last week, and I mean, I'll probably be, I'll be speaking to Pete Wilkins for, the latest kind of counselling session later. I mean, I think they're great. I mean, I have a passion for Irish soccer, as you know, as well. But my English soccer team is Spurs, and they remind me of Spurs. They're just going to be, or even Newcastle, the great Keegan team of the mid-90s who won nothing but excited everybody. They're just a bit like that. They need to get the defense sorted, because it's just that they're going nowhere with that. But yeah, they're really fun to watch, and we spoke about it earlier. That's what the game is all about. But it's hard to hang your hat on it, if you're kind of like a pedant about these things. But thankfully, I'm not a pedant, so it's just kind of enjoyable and a bit fun. So I can see them. I can see anything happening at the weekend. The only thing that kind of worries me is that Ulster are just. It's a funny one. I mean, okay, they have a few guys away with Emerging Ireland, but it's almost like there's a sense of them becoming like Connacht were when they were saved eventually, belatedly. But there are a few, like they're almost like a development province at the moment. I don't see, like, they're not realistically going to challenge for a trophy this year. Richie Murphy's gone in there, almost seconded from Ireland. I don't see him as a long-term option in terms of this is guy who's going to bring Ulster back to the area of we're going to challenge for trophies. So it seems like an interim almost appointment, and that David Humphreys, as he looks at James, who did quite well at the weekend, I thought, as an option there in the 10. I just think that there's a start of a strategy, a long-term strategy going to be worked out there. But at the moment, it just seems a bit kind of rudderless. And, there's all this talk about, well, a lot of young guys got experience in South Africa. But, we've been kind of hearing that every year for the last 5-6 years out of Ulster. So it's I find it just a very interesting time. You're kind of wondering, what is, what's the direction of travel for Ulster at the moment. But listen, they've some nice players. I mean, Ben Carson, had a few nice touches at the weekend. James McNabney was very decent in the back row. I say, son of David did all right as well. I'm sure he'll be well looked after by the new boss man. And Jacob Stockdale, again, have one of his occasional flashes of remember me. everybody. They'll kind of do it 2 weeks in a row. But they're very light in the pack. They're very light in the front row. They're, again, we have to talk about, the resources of Luke's former team, who were allowed snap up a very expensive prop, who I don't think we've mentioned at all this season, which just goes to show all the vast resources that Leinster have, and Ulster haven't been allowed to replace. Now, in fairness, Stephen Kitchoff is a waste of money and should have never been allowed happen in the first place. But Marty Moore sadly has been forced to confirm his retirement after a long struggle, and they're very weak. They just look very weak at the moment. And I think if Connacht are serious about being more than a fun team, Connacht need to go there and do a job at the weekend.
What do you think, Luke, to all that?
I'd say they're slight. Look, let's not forget round one as well, though. Like that was a good win against Glasgow at home, and I think that's where, like, if you're Ulster, that's where you're restarting. I'd agree with Dave. This is definitely a project. I don't necessarily agree that Richie mightn't be the guy. I think, I think he'll improve over time. I just knowing Richie, I think he also gives them an avenue, or should give them an avenue into some of the young talent that's coming through the systems that might be kind of, blocked up behind, so there's only 60 people can play rugby every week for, in a starting position in the provinces. Obviously 45 if you exclude Ulster. So, like, the vast majority of those people are going to be in, it looks to me, Leinster and Munster, and they're going to be stuck behind people that are maybe international. So Richie knows all these guys from teams that have been, won Grand Slams and things like that. I think there's some, to me, he's a very sensible selection because, they know him well. I'm sure he won't be that expensive. I think he'll improve over time because he's still, a young head coach in terms of the professional game. But he'll know all the guys who could be really good value for money coming through the system. That I'm amazed that they haven't been able to lure more people up there, because that would be the obvious spot for lots of people who are looking for game time. Like, you can imagine, one of those Leinster 10s. Like, this would be an ideal place to go and play. There's brilliant crowds come, very regularly to Kingspan. And I think there's potential there. I think they're coming from a really low base. That looks like an attractive enough proposition for me, provided they can get enough firepower in the pack to release some of those backs. There's still some very dangerous backs up there. Yeah, I'm probably not as downtrodden on them maybe as Dave. I do recognize, though, that it's a big challenge. I think I see lots of potential there. In terms of the match in the weekend, Connacht definitely slight favourites, I'd say, coming in just off the back of the kind of difference in form. Look, the match against the Lions wasn't as bad, but still lost by over 10 points. Now, look, I think they're a very different proposition at home, and I think that's you'd expect a bounce. So, look, like the other match, I think this one is tight. I'm calling it tight because I think Ulster, bounce back. They're difficult to beat at home. And it's, it'll be difficult for Connacht 2 weeks on the bounce to get 2 away wins, but not beyond them. They just need all the guys in the park and need to be sensible. It's a tight one for me. I think we're probably going to do predictions at the end, are we? Or should
predictions at the end? Yeah. Hold off it for a second. Actually, an interesting week as well in the Murphy household, won't it? And Jesus, another cracking try by Ben at the weekend. Come here, Dave. Before we get on to the predictions, obviously the Ireland women's team will play their final game of the WXV1 tournament on Friday. They play USA and 8:30 Irish time kickoff. Thankfully, a more convenient time for us watching from Ireland. So they were beaten 21-8 by Canada in the early hours of Saturday morning. Canada are the number 2 ranked team in the world. And I suppose, look, realistically here was all about performance. The key moments were those kind of yellow cards for Ireland midway through the first half. Then the 2 tries conceded before halftime, but they kept Canada scoreless in the second half. Emer Considine got a try in the second half, and they are becoming what their head coach Scott Beamont has spoken about. They are becoming a hard team to beat, and I think the expectations will be changed for this weekend's game against USA, because this game would have been the one that I would have thought they definitely would get a win in.
Yeah, and I mean, we spoke about this last week, and in terms of the landscape they're operating in now, which is has probably changed more dramatically, I'd say, probably than even a lot of them might have thought themselves. And just, again, looking at a broad picture, having, like yourself, followed the events sometimes too closely and very regrettably, it just means we can have different conversations about the team, and everyone else can have different conversations in terms of, we can observe them more realistically. And we speak a lot on this podcast about men's rugby, and it's the most popular a form of the sport in the country and in the world. But for too long, it seems that we haven't been able to speak about women's rugby in the same way. There have been excuses because of ill treatment or ignorance by the union. And, that has really, been patronising, and also has really been very disrespectful for a lot of players who were, and some are still not, fully professional. And even if they are professional, they're not well paid or as well looked after as professionals in other countries, or indeed any of the men in this country. But in terms of their rapid development now, it just means we can have those conversations, and that we can constructively criticize them, and not have anyone, either them or their supporters or cheerleaders or anyone else from the sidelines, saying, well, but it's a different landscape. And that's where they want to be. Mm-hmm. Like, as Luke will know, as an ex-professional, you want to go out there with a no excuses culture, and that you're based, and any observations, I hate the word criticism, observations are based purely on what happens when you cross the white line, knowing that everything has been done to support you. And that's the beauty of, with another hat on, I do a lot of work with the Irish women's soccer team, and that's where they've got to, and that's where this rugby team have deserved to get to. And finally, I'll touch a lot of wood here, finally, I hope, and it seems like they're there, and that's the best thing about it. And then, we're back into just the conversations that we have about Munster, Leinster, Ulster, Connacht, and Ireland, and the Lions, or whatever. And it's about performance and, players and arguments. And isn't that a beautiful, wonderful place to be?
Yeah, no, sure is. So that game on Friday, just a reminder, 8:30 Irish time kickoff. So the team will be named on Wednesday, and so the game is on Friday. So it will be certainly a nice way for them to sign off the year, their last test of the year against the USA, with a win. And I do think they will win that actually this weekend. So that's my prediction, lads. From me, what are your predictions for the Interpros this weekend? So Leinster against Munster and Ulster against Connacht. Go!
I think Leinster win this one. I think it's going to be tight. I think by 7 or less. Do I have to give a scoreline or no? Scoreline, okay.
Unless anything is really coming to you. The scoreline.
You know what? I prefer just to go. I think 7 or less. I think is probably. I think it's probably what I'm predicting. I'd love to see more of what the weather's going to be like. It's obviously this time of year is tricky to tell. From a point scoring perspective. Ulster, Connacht, I think it'd be difficult to do 2 away in a row for Connacht. I think Ulster as well, they need a kind of bounce back win at home. And I think they edge that one as well. Like, this is really boring, but I think that's a try or less as well. I think that's like a 4 or 5 point game as well, even tighter maybe than Leinster Munster. So, yeah, look, regardless, like, it's, must-watch TV, I think, isn't it? Which is what we all want. And yeah, I hope that's right, because you want a few nail biters for the derbies, don't you? The last thing you want is a blowout. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Maybe more hopeful rather than expectant, but we'll see.
Dave?
Yeah, I'm going to be boring as well. I think Leinster maybe 24-17, and I'll go Connacht 21-18. And also, just to note very, very sadly for Luke. We note coming out of England, I think next year's Lions are going to get about 100 grand a man, it seems. And back in your day, you got a wash bag, did you? And a mobile
No, we
phone?
got paid. We got paid. Not that
Yeah.
well, but we got paid. But no, look, I think it's great to see. Like, do you know what? I think it's probably necessary. Lots of people, I think, after a Lions tour seem to get injuries and that. It's such a physical, sport that we play, and to have gone, like, it's that one more step going on a Lions tour. So no, it's great to see it. I think, when you look at our kind of footballing counterparts over in the UK, and what we have to go through for kind of a fairly small portion, any extra money, I think, is well deserved in what'll be a very physical tour. So good to see. They're good things, I think.
But I thought the Lions was like the Ryder Cup of rugby. It was all about the heart and the camaraderie and going for a
You can
beer. It's
leave
not about
out.
the money.
Those
And
things are the thing is, you'd still go on it even if you weren't paid, if I'm being completely
Mm.
honest. But no, it's great that they paid them for it now. It's their job, I know. But like I suppose my dad played for Ireland. I'd play. I've always grown up playing for Ireland. When I started playing rugby, it was never to be wealthy, and it certainly didn't turn out that way when I finished anyway. So hence why I had to get a real job.
Okay,
But
well,
sorry, go on, Sinead. Sorry, I
well,
interrupted
I'm
you.
just going to wrap it up. So go on, do you see? Yeah.
No, that was it. I was just going to say, no,
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think, look, it's good that there's a bit of excitement building around the Lions. I heard some fairly awful chat about, they need to go play South Africa, New Zealand. I think that's terrible, and I hope the Aussies do improve a bit in the meantime. But the Lions is unbelievably special. You can't. That's one thing I hope, that isn't tampered with in professional rugby. I think that's one of the great kind of bastions. Yeah, no, I'm still excited about that. I think Joe Schmidt gets them very competitive by the time next summer comes around.
Okay, well, that is next summer. Some cracking games due this weekend. Luke and Dave, thank you very much for teeing it up nicely. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll be back again next week.